Behind every book you love is more than likely a shitty first draft. It might be nearly unrecognizable from the final product, or it could be similar and just less polished. But the thing that most beloved published books have in common is that before they were good, they were to some degree shitty. I know that my natural impulse is to try to sit down and write the best possible perfect book that I can, but in reality, most of what I write in my first draft doesn't end up looking anything like what the final draft does. So you may be asking, what's the point of writing this shitty first draft if you're just going to rework it and take everything out anyways? That's a good question, so let's get into it. Welcome back to the Blank Page podcast, where the goal here is to stop seeing the blank page as an enemy and a threat and start seeing it as an opportunity to get your ideas out of your head and into the world. I'm your host, C.E. Witherow. You can call me Kat. I am an indie author, former English major, former English teacher, and now I'm here talking about creative writing because I love it and I love writing books. We're going to get right into it. So first of all, we're going to talk about what is the shitty first draft. As the name pretty directly says, it is the first draft of a book that you're working on, but this version isn't very good. This is just getting words onto the page for the sake of getting them onto the page for having a draft done. And some people try to write like this really great, perfect version of their story in the first place. And honestly, I've tried that in the past, and one of two things happened. One, I was actually writing a book that wasn't as good as I thought it was. Or two, I just wouldn't actually finish the draft because I would get too hung up on something being bad and then I wouldn't be able to get past it because I couldn't figure out how to fix it when I didn't know exactly how the rest of the book was going to go. So that's a little TLDR on the shitty first draft. To me, the only thing that a first draft has to do to be successful is it has to be finished. It doesn't matter if you have to add in multiple more plot lines or make it longer or what have you. The book that I'm working on right now is actually different from when I recorded the last episode because I'm kind of pre-recording some of these first episodes to give me a little head start. And so now I'm working on a book that I actually wrote a shitty first draft of in summer of 2023, and then I shelved it because I was like, I know that this needs a lot of work and I don't know how to get there. But, it's been 2.5 years and I'm a better writer and I just know more about the world in general, and I've been kind of like slowly collecting little bits of information that I think could fix this draft, and now I'm working on it. And I am so thankful for this shitty first draft because parts of it aren't shitty, which is great. Also, I do want to apologize if you can hear my dog being loud. She is in her crate because if she isn't, then she sits right next to me and really aggressively chews her bone. And if you're watching on video, this is a framed watercolor portrait I've got of her because of course she's spoiled. So the shitty first draft really is just like the foundation that you can build the rest of your wonderful, beautiful book off of. And if you're saying like, I don't want to write a terrible first draft, I want to write something perfect the first time, girl, me too. But more than likely, it's just not possible. And trying to put that pressure on yourself to write something wonderful and perfect the first time, it just doesn't turn out very well. So here are some of the benefits of writing a shitty first draft. First of all, it takes off that pressure of trying to be perfect. You know that this is just for you. It's just to get your ideas out on the paper, start seeing the flow of your story, see if the characters are working, see if your plot is working. And it just takes that pressure off of feeling like, oh my God, this has to be like, I have this great idea and it has to be perfect. No, it doesn't. You can write something, and even while you're writing it, if you're like, this is not right, you can make a little note of it, maybe like leave a comment, or if you're using Scrivener, leave it in the little sidebar area and just say like, this needs to be fixed, but at least you have something on the page. The next benefit of writing a shitty first draft is that you can use it as a sort of organizational tool. And if you like have a scene where like they have a conversation and they talked about this and this, maybe like dialogue isn't your forte, or in like the early drafts you don't like writing a lot of dialogue, maybe you leave dialogue out of a bunch of scenes and you know that when you go back you're going to flesh it out more, but now you have the broader strokes of what might happen in the scene. Or the reverse is kind of what I'm doing in my, I guess it's a shitty second draft, but it feels like a shitty first draft because it's been so long since I wrote the first one. Sometimes I'll write out conversations even though I'm pretty sure that I'm going to cut them down or like maybe only keep a line or two, because you can use it as sort of a discovery. You can get into your characters, you can understand their quirks and how they talk, and like maybe you realize like they have some random catchphrase that you didn't intentionally write, but now every time you write dialogue for them, they're saying it be like that, and you're like, is that annoying? I hope not, because that's what I say all the time. I do say that too often to my coworkers. This is the downsides of being the only Gen Z in your workplace, is that I keep saying it be like that, and nope, everyone thinks it's hilarious, which is nice, but also nobody knows who Charlie XCX is. Isn't that crazy? I started talking to 3 of my coworkers about Charlie XCX, and they were like, who? And I was like, am I not on planet Earth? They didn't know what Brat was. It's 2026. You were here in 2024. What about Brat Summer? I said Kamala is Brat, and they said, what is that? Sorry, this has nothing to do with a shitty first draft. I'm just flabbergasted that my coworkers did not know who Charlie XCX was. You know, hey, maybe you're writing dialogue of one character who's like super disconnected from pop culture, and you're just thinking of like random celebrities that they will not know. I think that could be fun. But, you know, using the shitty first draft as an organizational tool, as just like a way to experiment with your characters and with your setting, and it's okay if you overwrite stuff in this first draft, or, you know, underwrite stuff and know that you want to add more later. Again, knowing that it's a shitty first draft takes a lot of the pressure off to feel like you have to write something perfect the first time. The next benefit is honestly the biggest one, in my opinion, of the shitty first draft. Editing something that sucks a little bit and making it into something good is 500 times easier than writing something good the first time, because you just have a little bit more perspective. You have a little bit more distance from it. You're not, you know, walking alongside your characters. You're able to read what they're doing and then dive back in and walk alongside them again and kind of, you know, point them in the right direction, whereas maybe before they weren't going in the way that you wanted them to. And I will be doing an episode soon about editing, since I am in the early stages of a full rewrite edit and I'm really vibing with it, so I will be sharing that soon. But once you have like this complete story in front of you, what I like to do personally when I finish a shitty first draft is I'll finish it, and then I like to put it onto my Kindle so that I can't edit it, and then I'll read it on my Kindle and kind of like make notes in a separate document off to the side, not in the Kindle app. And then once I've finished it, I have such a better understanding of like what the plot lines are, what the character arcs are, who is, you know, doing major plot points when. And it makes it a lot easier to find plot holes, fix those plot holes, fix any issues that pop up, you know, correct character misgivings. Like, I know that I named like 4 side characters in my story Susan, and then I named like another 4 Jane, because when I was writing I just threw in whatever names. And like while I'm writing, yeah, obviously I'm not going to notice if I'm writing a chapter over the course of a couple of weeks, I'm not going to notice that I named a random person who came up and talked to the main character Jane, and then later also named like a co-host of a TV show that she saw on Jane. But rereading it, I'm like, oh, there was just somebody named Jane. We gotta. Adam Levine did not possibly write songs about all of these Janes. She will be loved. Okay, another tangent, because otherwise this episode simply will not be long enough. Recently, the Bluetooth in my car hasn't been working. I'm pretty sure I did something and I just need to figure it out, and I just haven't had time yet. So I've been listening to the radio, and in Rochester there's this one station called Fickle 93.3, and their whole thing is like, we play everything. And I'm like, you know what? Hell yeah. So there's this one night I just had like awful day. Like, I was crying to Rat-a-Tat by Fall Out Boy off of the Save Rock and Roll album because of the line, "It's never getting any better than this." Yes, I was on my period. Don't see how that's relevant, but since you asked. And then on the way home, I was like, let me put on Fickle 93.3. Let's see what they got on there. They had Funky Town playing. I'm like, you know what? Who could cry to Funky Town? Not me. Because when you're crying to Funky Town, you have to start laughing. There's simply no other choice. And so I'm giggling at the fact that I have, you know, that I'm crying during Funky Town. And then they're like, Fickle 93.3, we play everything. And what starts playing but She Will Be Loved by Maroon 5? Are you fucking kidding me? Is this a personal attack? I was not in the mental state to gorilla get bombarded with She Will Be Loved by Maroon 5. I'm like, what, now you want me to be depressed and 15 years old again? I'll do it. I'll go back to teenage depression. But that's just a fun little story. Just a little anecdote. Those are my anecdotes for today. Let me know if I should talk about myself less. I probably won't, but let me know what you think. And the last benefit to me of writing a shitty first draft is that you can get a shitty first draft done a lot faster than trying to write something like really good that you want to share off the bat. So one of the rules of shitty first draft, which we'll get to in a second, is you do not go back and edit as you write. And the thing about editing as you go is if you go back and edit every single time that like, oh, I decided to change this character name. Let me just go back and like change all of this. But then later on, maybe you change the character name again, and now you got to change it twice, and you're just wasting time. Or like, oh, I'm going to go back and change this scene so that these characters meet here instead of there. And then later on, you're like, oh, actually, no, I should go back to the other way. And now you've rewritten it twice. That's 2 drafts worth of work, maybe even 3 drafts worth of work on a single scene that you just wasted on one shitty draft. What's that about? And now some tips for writing your shitty first draft. I'm not going to go into like the outlining, storyboarding aspects of writing your first draft, working on a project. I am planning on doing an episode about that at some point. Take a shot every time I say that if you want to, I don't know, just get a little buzz since I've only said it twice. But if you're sitting down to write your shitty first draft, here's a couple of things to keep in mind. First of all, agree with yourself, and no one else needs to know about this agreement, but never let anybody else read your shitty first draft. I think that what makes the shitty first draft so freeing is that I know that when I'm writing it, it's just for me. It's almost like another version of an outline. Like, obviously it's a lot more fleshed out. Like, I haven't written a 60,000 word outline, but I've written a 60,000 word shitty first draft, which is too short for the genre that I'm writing in, and I know that. So now I can go in the next draft and flesh it out a little bit, which is what I'm doing now. I feel like when you tell yourself nobody except for me is going to read this, again, it takes some of that pressure off. Lets you say, okay, this is just a tool for me to get to my final draft. This is not a final destination. This is the first stop on a American cross-country road trip. Like, there's going to be a lot of stops. There's going to be a lot of mileage that you're going to be putting on to this project. And if you try to go too far the first day, try to go too far with your shitty first draft, then you're just going to end up burned out, and you're not going to like the project. You're not going to finish the draft. It's just a lot. So don't let anyone read it, because they can read the second draft or the third draft or whatever draft you feel like is ready to be shared. This next one, again, kind of mentioned this a second ago, but do not edit as you go. If you realize like, oh wait, I have to fix XYZ thing. Like, this is happening in the draft that I'm working on right now. I'm only on chapter 2, and I already realized like, oh, I gotta change something in chapter 1. But instead of going back and fixing it, even though I was really, really tempted to, because I was like, I'm only on chapter 2, how much time could I waste doing this? And I was like, no, because if I start doing it now, I will do this throughout the entire draft, and that is a slippery slope. So instead, I just went back and made a little note. I use Scrivener to write, so there's like a little sidebar that has like comments and notes sections. So I put my little notes in my little notes section and said like, change this next draft, like change this detail, blah, blah, blah. And that way, when you go to write your next draft, you have the note there, so you know kind of what you want to change. But if halfway through the book you realize like, oh no, the original thing I wrote actually works better than what I was going to change it to, now you don't have to try to find your old version, because searching through version history it's not my favorite personally. I mean, if that's your thing, you do you. But my next tip is that if you're working on your draft and you're like, I don't know if I should put this in or not, like, does this really make sense? Just throw it in there. You can overwrite as much as you want in this first draft, because you can always cut stuff later, and it's a lot easier to edit something down once you kind of know the overall flow. Because I know that personally, again, the book that I'm working on right now, it's called Do I Have Your Attention Now? By the way, I probably should have mentioned that at some point as I'm continuously talking about this draft. It is a thriller about a girl named Julia Johnson who really wants to be a true crime podcaster, investigative journalist, and nobody's really paying attention to her podcast as much as she wants to, so she does start committing murders and then covers them herself so that she can profit off of that. So do with that what you will. As I like to say, Julia Johnson would kill to be the #1 true crime podcaster, and she does. she does. One thing with my shitty first draft of this project is that I definitely underwrote a lot of parts, and like I said, the word count is around like 60k for the first draft, which a thriller usually is somewhere around like 80k. So obviously pretty short on words, but that's definitely something that I can fix in this next draft. And it's a lot easier to fix things and to add things in when you know the overall arc of the story, because, if you're rereading your draft and you're like, this part's really dragging, like maybe I gotta cut a couple thousand words from this chapter. Or if you're a part and you're like, whoa, the story is moving way too fast in this section, which is what happened when I was rereading my draft, then like, okay, I got to figure out how to add a little bit more going on in this chapter. Maybe they need to have like more dialogue so there's more context to things. Maybe I realize I need to add an entire extra chapter to have a little bit more time pass throughout my story. So I definitely think that overwriting in the first draft or underwriting, whichever one is like more your thing, because I know some people like they want to type 100,000 words. Like my first book that I published, Daisy Plucked, it's a sapphic YA Hamlet retelling, and when I wrote the first draft of that book, it was well over 100,000 words, which it is a YA thriller. It needs to be like 80 to 90,000 words. I honestly cannot remember what the final word count is, which I probably should remember because I wrote it, but I know that the first draft was like 125,000 words. I super overwrote it, but then I was able to figure out what I could take out, and there was kind of like some repetitive stuff. Like I had a couple of scenes where the main characters went to a party, and when I started working with editor, she was like, these scenes are pretty similar, so you can overwrite, and then later you can figure out what to take out. And my final tip for writing your shitty first draft is to not reread your draft until it's done. I know that it's really tempting to go and reread and figure out where, like, what's happened so far, especially if you took a break from your draft. But even if you took a break, maybe just reread like the last chapter, because I know that personally it's really, really, really hard for me to reread a draft that's in progress and reread something and not start making little tweaks and little edits, and we're not doing that. So if you have that tendency like I do to edit as you go and you really want to, instead try not editing as you go and not even rereading as you go. And it's okay if you have discrepancies. That's fine. You can catch that in the final reread. It doesn't matter if you make little mistakes because you are the only one who's going to be reading this draft. And writing is fun. Like, it's not always fun, but it should be overall pretty fun. I mean, I know that writing for me is a hobby. I would love for it to be a career. I love writing with my entire heart, but at the same time, it is a marathon, not a sprint to write a book. So if you need to write stuff that you know is not perfect, maybe you're having a shitty writing day and you're just like, I just need to write like 100 words so that I can keep moving forward in the story, and it doesn't matter if those 100 words suck as long as I'm writing them. I've had days like that. But just remember that the shitty first draft is just another tool in your arsenal to get to a final beautiful draft. I kind of wish somebody had given me this advice when I first started going into writing novels. I gotta wrap this up because my dog is stressed about being in her crate. But the first book that I wrote before Daisy Plucked, I wish somebody told me about the shitty first draft concept, because I thought my first draft was great. I was like, this is awesome. There's no flaws. I did like some minor edits and I was like, I'm gonna query this. You can imagine how that went. I mean, I indie published Daisy Plucked, so you can see how that querying process went as well. But I think that if I had the idea in my head that the first draft wasn't good, or that it didn't have to be really good, it would make editing a lot easier. So this is just stuff that I wish I had known earlier, because even though my background is in creative writing, like that was my minor in undergrad, and I took as many creative writing classes as I could in grad school, novel writing is a very different beast from any other sort of creative writing. Like, I've written a bunch of short stories, I've written a bunch of poetry, and some of it has gotten published, and that's fun. But writing a book is a whole different beast from writing a short story or a poem. And I'd love to do episodes on writing short stories or writing poetry if people are interested in that. I don't know. Nobody's even listened to the podcast yet because I'm recording the second episode before the first has even come out. So, that's life. That's death. Your girlfriend scares me. She's got that breath, or whatever Joe said. And, final segment of the show is me talking about what I'm reading right now. So last time I was talking about reading 100 Years of Solitude. I didn't get that far into it, and then my library loan expired and I went to renew it and somebody else was waiting in line, so then I'm back in line to listen to that audiobook again. But currently I had a couple of holds by T. Kingfisher become available through my Libby app, and I am in such a huge T. Kingfisher phase right now. I read her book Nettle and Bone for a book club in January, and I just loved it so much. And I've read Hemlock and Silver. Oh my god, such a good fucking book. So good, so attention grabbing, so like visceral. I just love the way that she writes fantasy. I'm currently reading What Moves the Bones, I want to say. It's a retelling of The Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe, which I'm a huge fan of that short story. Even though I haven't read it, I like the retellings because I loved the Mike Flanagan show, The Fall of the House of Usher. I could go on about Mike Flanagan TV shows for a while, so I will not even get into it, but that's what I'm reading right now. I'm trying to also like get a little bit more into nonfiction stuff recently, not necessarily self-help, but I have ADHD and I'm trying to get my shit together in a big way right now. So I'm currently reading How to Keep House While Drowning by Casey Davis, I want to say is her name. This book is like actually changing my entire mentality around like keeping my house together. I'm finding it extremely helpful as a person with ADHD who has terrible executive dysfunction issues. So let me know what you're reading. Let me know what you're writing. I'd love to hear about it. Love to gab. As you can tell, I love a yap. So I think that's going to be it for today's episode. So in the meantime, keep reading, keep writing, and keep on keeping on. See you next week. Bye.